All right, Andrew Edwards, welcome back to the Jay Burden Show. How you doing, man?
Good. I'm glad to be with you again.
Yeah, so we are continuing our much vaunted movie review series. You picked the last one, ish, kind of. You gave me a list, and I just dictated to you what we're doing this week, and we are doing the 1998 comedy, maybe romance, maybe film Buffalo 66. So, a little bit of context on this. Uh, this is one of my brother-in-law and my wife's favorite movies. They love it. I had no preconceptions about either this movie or Vincent Gallo, the director, star, writer. And the first time I went through it, I couldn't take it. I tapped out at about the 50% mark. It was just too bizarre, too weird, too uncomfortable. And then the second time, I sat back through it and genuinely enjoyed it. Uh, I don't know if I necessarily have the greatest argument as to why I enjoyed it, but as part of that, I've sort of also become fascinated by Vincent Gallo as sort of the world's most insane film auteur. He is reviled by many people, which is
Yeah.
sort of funny. But anyway, Andy, I'll kick it back to you. I'm curious to get your thoughts. We were talking a little bit about your kind of initial reaction upon seeing the movie.
Yes. Maybe for our listeners, I mean, we give them a little bit of the intro. There isn't. It's an indie movie, so it isn't like there's a highly complicated plot, and the emphasis is really on these characters. And I know a couple other things just to kind of set the table for anybody who does want to see this movie. I noticed going back, I must have seen this like in 1998. I think it was that right? 1998 it comes out. But I don't remember any of it. And Burden says to me, we're doing this movie. So, okay. So I sit down after a very long day, and likewise, I didn't make it 50%. I wanted to tap out at about, I don't know, like really the minute that Vincent Gallo's character gets out of jail, which is how the movie opens. You're like, man, this guy is disgusting. Like, this is not somebody that I can identify with. And therein begins what is really a great movie in many ways, but is extremely difficult. Anyway, for me to get through. One thing to note is, he's going for a kind of like 70s John Cassavetes, feel and vibe. And that's something pretty interesting because he brings in Ben Gazzara as his dad, who worked with famously John Cassavetes on a number of movies, including what I think is Cassavetes' best, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, and he's in some other ones. But I think that plays into how the movie has situated itself in like popular culture or history. Vincent Gallo is, like you were saying earlier, I mean, he's polarizing, but he's got a lot of respect from a lot of people too. So for the audience, once again, guy gets out of prison and immediately wants to go over and see his parents, who this is all set in Buffalo, which is this kind of awful, the weather is very gray, and it's everything about it is kind of depressing and weird, which may be accurate. I've never been to Buffalo. Have you been?
It's an accurate depiction.
It is. Okay.
I don't know for sure. I'd be shocked if it wasn't filmed there, because if not, that is exactly what Buffalo looks like.
Yeah. Well, I looked into it a little bit, and apparently it is at least almost all shot in Buffalo, and a ton of it is shot actually in Vincent Gallo, the director writer, is from Buffalo, and a lot of it is shot in his parents' house, in the house that he grew up in. And well, maybe I'll set the rest of that aside and finish this idea. So, again, for the listeners, like not much really happens in terms of plot. Uh, he wants to go see his mom and dad. He immediately kidnaps this girl, and then they go over to his mom and dad's house, and we find out that he's been in jail because he was sort of set up to take the fall for another guy in this betting scheme. He does his 5 or 7 years or something. He gets out, and there he is. He has nowhere. He's pretty young I mean, I guess he's supposed to be maybe 30 or something, like late 20s. And from there, yeah, like, what do you think? Like, not much really happens. It's really about this guy's internal thing and the relationship between him and the girl.
So you're right. And that is sort of the A plot, right? Him, meeting this girl. It's sort of a inversion of the classic rom-com trope where, when he was away in jail, we find this out later in the narrative, used his mentally disabled friend Goon, who is a background character in this, to basically send his parents letters, right? Post dated, so that they would think that he is, living this life as a, man of mystery, right? Flying all around the world. And as part of this, he's married. So he gets out of jail, which is sort of played up in this kind of like sad, pathetic way. He's just, trying to, the whole inciting incident is he's trying to find a bathroom, right? And he runs into this dance studio, and that's where he sees this girl, Layla, kidnaps her, demands that she drive him to his parents' house. And this is where you get kind of the comedy of it, because he is vacillating between completely normal conversations and insane threats, threatening to kill her, just badgering her constantly. And she is, relatively speaking, a normal person compared to, Vincent Gallo kind of chewing the scenery. And so, that's the inciting incident to the main plot. But in the background, we find out that, he was put away for betting on the Buffalo Bills at at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And, at this notable Super Bowl, he put $10,000 on the Buffalo Bills to win. The best kicker in the league misses the field goal, right? Screws the game, screws him. And so when he gets out, he's concocted this plan to, go find this kicker and shoot him. And so that's sort of the B plot, the background. The interactions between, Vincent Gallo and Layla are just off the rip incredibly uncomfortable. Like he's threatening her with the most insane threats over very minor things. This is a very quotable movie. One of the funniest parts is, he's kidnapped her, from this dance studio, which is shot in kind of a comedic way. Like he's just dragging this girl past like a bunch of 8-year-old girls, like doing ballet. But he goes out to her car. He shoves her in the passenger seat. He gets in the driver's seat. And we find out that, she drives, a manual. Weirdly enough, this is funny that this car was at the time sort of a comedic shitbox. And now those old 80s Corollas are worth like 15 grand bare minimum. Just a funny aside. Has this massive blowout rant where he talks about, I don't know how to drive shifter cars. I drive luxury cars. Do you know what a luxury car is? I drive Cadillacs. Just berating this almost completely silent woman, which you're right, is incredibly uncomfortable, but man, it is pretty funny.
It is hilarious.
Chewing the scenery.
Yeah. God, there's so many scenes like that. I thought you were going to go for the one where he's talking about, he's threatening her, what he will do if she runs off. But the whole time there's zero indication that she's ever going to run off, which is part of the comedy, right? Like he does kind of violently grab her, which I came back to towards the end. In sort of like a primitive sense, he establishes this like absolute base level relationship with her right there. And there's sort of like this indication, well, maybe he's going to abscond with her or rape her. And it turns out to be the absolute opposite of that, right? At the end, his like mommy problems are so profound that when the time comes when this relationship gets like quote intimate, we can get there to that because that's its whole other thing. But the way that he describes what he's going to do to her, I'm going to take a big bite out of your cheek and then shit it out. He there's no capacity within this guy to actually do this to her. And there's no indication from her that she's actually going to leave. And so it sets this bizarre tension that is, you're right, like kind of comedy gold, where you wonder, like, what are these people doing? Like, what is really happening here when he's not going to come through on any of these threats. He's totally inept and she doesn't even want to leave. And she's just met him. Like, what's going on with that part of it? What did you make of the Christina Ricci characters just kind of giving over to that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because she is, in a weird way, incredibly passive, right? She's just along for the ride. And some of that's just artifice, right? It's a movie or whatever. But I do think that it is incredibly interesting, especially because she seems to be basically the only person in the world who actually pays attention to Vincent Gallo in any capacity at all.
Yep.
He's otherwise sort of, completely ignored. And I think it's interesting because you sort of see this distinction between, like, and it's funny, we haven't even using his real name because there are kind of questions about how autobiographical this movie is.
Right.
But, Gallo's kind of very incomplete projected self-image and how everyone else actually sees him. Because, on up to the very beginning, you don't actually know really what's going on. You are not given the sort of context about, taking the dive and the bet and all that.
Right.
And so, you're sort of in real time learning that this guy is kind of just a massive loser. Like, his best friend has special needs. His parents hate him. He doesn't really have anything going on in life other than, this relationship with Layla. And what's interesting, and we'll get into this at the end of the movie, is that his sort of core motivation is sort of killing the guy who sent him to prison, right? This kicker.
Yeah.
And that is sort of the one animating thrust throughout this entire movie. And he is able to sort of discard that for this relationship in a way that's oddly touching, given the griminess of this movie otherwise. I actually, to get back to your much earlier point about, sort of the echoes to the 70s. It's kind of an interesting thing because obviously this was the late 90s, so it's a little bit ahead of the curve. But in my mind, really the 2000s through the 2010s are like kind of this weird, like the emergence of kind of retro futurism. Like you see this in car designs, right? Like the new Mini, the Volkswagen Beetle, all of those being brought back as kind of echoes to a previous era, but also in film as well. I mean, to be honest, a lot of Tarantino's work is again calling back to the kind of grindhouse look. Robert Rodriguez, basically made a career on doing exactly that. Yeah. But I think it's interesting as well because I actually hadn't even thought about that, but once you mentioned it, like there are multiple features of this that are basically out of, a movie 20 years earlier, right? The whole fact that this guy, like, I mean, to be honest, the way he's dressed, but the prominence of bowling, right? That whole scene is sort of dripping in it. And, it's funny. I would not have noticed that, but you're kind of spot on that.
Yeah. It was one of the first things that I noticed, because it's shot in film too. I mean, it must have been shot in film. I don't think that digital was really even available at that time. And you're right. I mean, the clothes, the weird like platform boots, these red. He's wearing this drab kind of totally gray outfit, and it's all skinny.
The boots are kind of Thomas 777. You can see him wearing those boots.
Yeah, good point. They really are. And then he has these like almost like ruby slippers, sort of just one splash of color. And some of the techniques too that I actually liked. Some of the lighting techniques. He seems to homage maybe David Lynch with Eraserhead. Although David Lynch uses this technique later in his career too, where a spotlight sort of erupts into the naturalistic lighting and draws us into some sort of a dream scenario. That's one. He uses that technique of where he which I thought was, I usually don't like that sort of stuff, like gimmicks or whatever, especially maybe now, as you point out, like it's almost like it's gone through one loop back and then another, and in each loop back it maybe gets a little bit, I don't know if it's compressing into some like truth or if it's kind of getting diluted. I'm really not sure, but he uses this technique of many screens within the screen. And I have to admit that was pretty useful and pretty cool way to kind of, he would transition into backstory, and he would transition like kind of to show the interior of his character's mind. And I guess overall, it seems like in reading up on the movie that Gallo wrote the script 10 years earlier and didn't really expect to be the director. But I don't know how true that is. When I think about Vincent Gallo and like what he has become, but then again, I don't know. I was hoping to go back to you because this aspect where you don't really know like how much of this is Vincent Gallo and how much isn't, and then how much, because this has been, he's been queried on this point many, many times. I don't think he's giving like the truth. I don't think Vincent Gallo, the man, is concerned about the truth. What do you think when you take this whole package in? I feel like this is more like the younger generation. He's kind of preempted Gen X, and he's kind of picked up on your guys' stuff like a layer deeper than maybe Gen X experiences it, where he's using irony. And again, what do you think? What do you make of all that?
Yeah, so there are several things there. I mean, it's become kind of trite to refer to someone as almost a performance artist, but let's be honest, that's what Vincent Gallo is doing.
Yeah.
His personal website is insane and really funny. And you can just imagine him grinning because it has some of the most insane, offensive one-of-one hand-painted t-shirts. For instance, it's like, and I'll have to beep this, but it's like, like Barack Obama, and it just says faggot in giant red block letters. He has an application where you can apply for $500,000 for a natural or artificial dose of his sperm, provided that you're attractive enough. And it's like I'm not joking. It's like a 3-page rant about who will and won't meet his criteria, including entire races and continents he is not interested in. So like, you look at that and you're like, all right, clearly he is to a certain degree playing a bit, right? He is, deliberately sort of casting himself in opposition to Hollywood, while at the same time, being surrounded by, high fashion, all that. So he's not truly this sort of, I don't believe he is truly the character he portrays. But as regards kind of like the irony of it, I think that's a very interesting element. One of the things that, and that's sort of, I guess in my mind, what I find irritating in the conversation around this movie is you have a lot of kind of pearl clutching responses that say, oh, Vincent Gallo is just horrible to women in this movie. This is a misogynistic movie. And it's like, well, I mean, if this person actually existed and actually did this, sure. But I think that that's almost a too direct reading of this film. And I think that, from my mind, what we're sort of seeing is, this man who's sort of marked by profound abandonment. So I don't know if this is actually true, but it feels like the longest section of this movie. It is sort of like the cinematic equivalent of having your fingernails pulled out. Is, the scene at his parents' house.
Yes,
it's kidnapped this girl.
It's so bad.
It goes on forever. Like it's genuinely so uncomfortable. And his parents, or particularly his mother, is literally obsessed with the Buffalo Bills. Their house is decorated in that manner. She's watching reruns while they're at the table. And to almost a comedic degree, his parents, particularly his mother, are uninterested in Billy. That's, the name of, Gallo's character. They're slightly interested in Layla a little bit, not very much. But I mean, really, that is her entire life. Again, this is sort of those, it's so over the top. It's sort of played for a joke. The moment where they, this girl asks, "Oh, well, can I see a picture of Billy?" And they're going through their photo album, and it's just her with an increasingly obscure list of people connected to the Buffalo Bills. It starts off with players, then assistant athletic directors, and then it gets to, the caterer and the bus driver. And of course, right, it's played for a joke, but when they finally go to see Billy's photo, it's somewhere else. It's all folded up and gross. And, we get this kind of, again, slightly comedic over the top childhood trauma where his dad, chokes his puppy to death in front of him for barking too loudly. And interesting enough, that's shot. I don't know if it actually, the aspect ratio changes, but that's another time where we see that sort of frame within a frame. And it's shot almost like 8mm film, right? Like it has that sort of, film autists are going to get on me for that, but it looks like, kind of a handheld, film camera.
Yeah.
Kind of interestingly done. And so with regards to the, kind of the irony of this, it's like, well, obviously he's sort of playing it up, hamming it up. This is comedic in a certain sense. It's so over the top. And we'll see that, even in the conclusion to the movie. But also I think that there is something interesting being said there about this kind of the culture of distraction and abandonment, right? This idea that, his mother in particular is so much more obsessed with something that is fake and not real, that is this kind of TV, experience that she is completely and totally disconnected from her son. And as these people have no doubt heard me complain about the last 2 weeks, we've been just buried in snow here. And so my wife and I have been walking to most places just because it's, safer and more reliable. And while we were walking, through the ice, she was talking about this movie and just kind of speculating about how it could be reinterpreted as, politics and culture have shifted, right? Because there's a certain reading of this, which is the kind of, very generic TV bad, it rots your brain kind of reading. But I think it's interesting, one, to the degree that we genuinely see this exact same dynamic with many people of the kind of, boomer and silent generation with, news of all type, but also, right, like the Skinner box in your pocket, this sort of device of distraction, which kind of pulls you away from, your actual human connections. And clearly this has marked Billy, right? You were talking about, again, his kind of, mommy issues, right? That is the hole that he is sort of trying to fix. One other moment, and, you mentioned the kind of film gimmicks, and I'll kick it back to you. There's sort of a bizarre scene, and Billy's dad is just lecherous this entire time. To almost a ludicrous degree. It's just feeling up this woman. And he invites her into another room to listen to him sing.
Yeah.
And he basically just lip syncs Frank Sinatra, I believe, on a record player for almost an unbroken 2 minutes as he stares into the camera, lit like he's on stage at vaudeville. Very bizarre scene. So I'll kick it back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, extremely bizarre and very uncomfortable, right? There's this. The whole time maybe I saw this a long time ago, and I'm not sure that I ever did see the whole movie, but this time I'm just waiting for him to try and rape her or make a move on her in some sense. There's this just awful undercurrent to the whole thing, like established at the level that now lecherous dad and young girl with, half of her chest exposed, they're back in this back room, and Billy is just looking at the one picture that they have of him. His mom has this whole catalog, as you mentioned, of all of her absurd Buffalo Bills connections, and they have one single picture of their son. And when they switch over to the Ben Gazzara character, his dad, and by the way, evidently this is another one of these crossover weird I don't know how we understand this. Evidently, Vincent Gallo's dad really does have some incredibly beautiful singing voice. And he is this guy who's, I mean, you imagine sitting in some, like depressing basement, imagining what he could have been. And that's Vincent Gallo's actual experience. And evidently his dad is just this maniacal asshole, like over the top in real, like that's what Vincent Gallo's experience of having a father is. And evidently his mother is not too far from this over the top vision that he presents in the film. But yeah, it thinking about it and talking about it with you now, I realize Gallo is pulling more from David Lynch in terms of his style and technique than I ever noticed before. I have seen his other, Brown Bunny, is his other kind of controversial film. And those are probably they may be his only two movies, but I have seen that one. But I did not realize how much of the Lynchian ethos aesthetic that he is just borrowing from fully. And it's in that scene with the puppy. It's like, it's almost just note for note Lynchian, how he's moved or altered the visual just enough and then gone into this type of absurd level of violence. And, part of the discomfort in watching it now, I think wasn't like available to viewers it wasn't available to me. Okay. This level where it's kind of common to hear of these just horror stories of how bad parents are. I mean, I look at normal parents around me now, and I have to be critical of them. They're not hitting like a standard benchmark and I'm talking about people at church, people who are otherwise pretty good citizens. I'm still looking over at them saying, Jesus, this parenting is really substandard. So if you go back, this is 35 years. One thing that stands out about this is, and part of why Vincent Gallo must be kind of hated is, dude, he saw this like narcissism of the female and the corruption of the mother figure, evidently through his own experience, which is horrible and tragic and probably explains why he's such an asshole himself now. But that was that was 30 years ahead of the curve. And it's points like that where at the end of the movie, I really had that moment of, I had to reevaluate a lot of my not very developed conceptions of Vincent Gallo as an artist. As you say, like he's a performance artist. He's made albums. He's doing all sorts of really strange things, and not strange and just unusual. And maybe he deserves maybe some more credit than he's been given, because I guarantee you that if we were to like go back in the record and look at reviews, nobody could have, I don't think, taken on that vision of the mother as so just, she's the worst to me. I mean, that scene that you mentioned where they're at the table is so hard to take. And it's not because of like personal stuff related to me. I think it's every human being watches this and is like, this dude has literally nothing. I mean, his mom doesn't even give a shit about him. And his dad, of course, is terrible.
So two things there. One that's kind of interesting again about the character of his mother is that, his dad is this sort of, quiet but still domineering presence, but he occupies a very small space physically within the house. He has his room, right, where he goes to sing, but Billy's mom runs the roost, right? Her stuff is everywhere. The Buffalo Bills memorabilia is on every part of the house. And even, when Billy leaves, she's in the kitchen and his dad is retreating back to kind of his little cave. Yeah. And I think that that's a very interesting dynamic to bring up as well. Now, obviously, there's, again, the kind of over the top, parts of this. One of the things that she brings up, at the table is how upset she was that she was giving birth to Billy when the Bills were at the Super Bowl in 1966 and she missed, the big moment. Yeah. And she says, I think that's why, I think that was the curse. I was there with them for the whole season and then I wasn't, and they lost the big game. But there's actually kind of an interesting dynamic between, her and Layla, where Layla is, for some reason, inexplicably trying to do a very good job of pretending to be, Billy's devoted fiance. She's, saying how much she likes him, telling the story of how they met, all the things that normal parents would be concerned with. She even says like, oh, we're having a baby, which, is obviously not true. She's just lying. But throughout the entire thing, Billy's dad is just like eyeing her up the entire time shamelessly. Yes. And Billy's mom is at the table, turned the opposite direction, watching a taped game from 25 years ago, right? Like getting up and cheering during the whole thing. And it's this moment where and I think you are supposed to both hate and sympathize with Billy because he's despicable, right? He's just the worst.
So
and
bad.
Even like halfway through this conversation, he gets up to go berate Goon, his best friend, who is living at home with his mom. He has like the shot composition on this is insane. He's got like open containers of like guinea pigs in this like disgusting room. The shot is him shirtless with, to be polite, his underwear slightly too far down his body. And it's shot from like his chest to like his knees. Like it's just disgusting shot placement.
It is awful. Yeah.
And he's just in the other room berating this simple-minded kid for, not giving him the information as to where this, kicker who flubbed the big game is. So, Billy eventually, gets that information. He decides to, leave. This is, roughly about the kind of 50-50 mark. And, Billy goes to, this bowling alley. And, it's his first time out of jail. The guy he talks to, says like, oh yeah, we kept your locker for you, all your stuff. And this is I don't want to say this is one of the most bizarre scenes, but it's up there. There's a whole lot going on. So we get a couple things, which is one, Billy goes in, we see his locker is undisturbed. He does seem to have some sort of, like friendship connection to the guy who runs it. Right. And we get a couple things in his locker. We get, a whole bunch of sort of memorabilia of him as a highly talented youth bowler, one who bowls. I don't know what the term of that is, sort of echoing, what we see in his father's room, right? The idea of this kind of untapped potential derailed by life. And also Chekhov's school picture, right? A picture of a girl. And, when, Layla asks him about it, he goes, oh, it's some girlfriend I had. I've had a lot of girlfriends or whatever. He starts bowling. He's bowling a perfect game. She asks if she can take a turn. She gets a strike. And at that moment, his concentration is ruined, right? He can't do anything. there's a very bizarre scene where she tap dances in seemingly this sort of dream state
Yeah,
for, again, like 2 minutes. I don't really have an explanation for that. It's a very odd scene.
it is. Well, it's again this like Lynch technique where right, like the spotlight, the unnatural spotlight hits the otherwise naturalistic lighting, and we're just in this dream sequence. I don't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to say, yeah, there again, you're right. The other, since I did interrupt you, I just wanted to mention that that scene like changes the whole game for me with respect to Billy, because you realize like, wait a minute, this dude has something like a really, he's like you say, like a bowling savant or something. He's got this very like they say, the third place or whatever. He's a loser at school. He's a loser at home, but he goes to this bowling alley evidently, and he becomes like this stud. I mean, the dude behind the counter it seems to evidence like genuine admiration and respect. And he Vincent Gallo kind of changes into this like a gangster suave, like a real dude. And then he just hits strike after strike after strike. And it occurred to me like I don't mean to jump too far ahead, but it just occurred to me as I was watching this, like, oh, Billy's whole thing here in terms of like the parents that don't love him and you know, his diminished avenues in life or what have you. He makes this bet on his mom's dream, you know, the Buffalo Bills is to come through, and this derails everything. When he had this opportunity, if he really had the 10 grand, which it's not clear if he ever even had the 10 grand to make the bet, which gets him in so much trouble, but he could have like, you know, the expression like bet on yourself, like believe in yourself, which in some way does manifest at the end of the film where he's kind of been able to wend his way through the little, you know, like the psychic forest that he's been dumped into by these completely insufficient parents who have left him like, on the one hand, he has this vision of females in general, which is I mean, it's just putrid. I mean, you could not, if you had this mom like and you wind up at all functional, it would be a miracle. And if you have this dad, likewise, you know, to think that you could find it within yourself to be good at something. So I just wanted to throw in that for me, when he shows that there's a part of him that is cool, that is capable, and he has this talent at bowling, and he may have had the opportunity to bet that 10 grand on himself and go a whole other way. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's sort of an interesting thing as well, right? That he was doomed by, in a way, kind of ultimately seeking, you know, approval from his approval from his, you know, neglectful mother. Like that is ultimately the thing that sort of damned him, you know, trying to, you know, fill that void directly. So, you know, rounding out the scene at the bowling alley, there's another eminently quotable and incredibly bizarre scene where, you know, he decides like, I want, you know, he drags her into a photo booth, you know, and basically it's like, all right, I gotta have photos to send my parents, right? And we gotta keep, you know, changing the background so it looks like we're in different places or at different times. That obviously that has flaws with it, but it's this sort of scene where they're together, you know, in this cramped photo booth, kind of shot from the camera's POV in the photo booth. And, you know, it goes through the first time and he's just furious with her. He's like, no. We're a couple that likes each other, but doesn't touch. We span time together, and just says that in minor derivations throughout the entire thing. You know, he's, interestingly enough, because this will, you know, circle back around, he's furious with her for wasting his money, right? The idea that we had to go through this process of getting photos. It's like 50 cents, right? It's an inconsequential amount of money. But yes, they you know, they leave the bowling alley, and, head out to, I believe they go to Denny's next. Is that the next?
Yes. Yes.
And so this is again, we see, both, kind of Chekhov's school portrait and this kind of view of, Billy as this kind of, social outcast, because, while they're there, he runs into this girl, right? The girl from the photo. And we find out that not only is she, played as this kind of like comically awful, shallow person dating some like soulless corporate suit, and even kind of taunting Billy is like, oh, you're that weirdo who followed me around. I don't even know your name. And, he's having this sort of hushed conversation with Layla while the other couple is making out in the back in this Denny's. And it gets kind of more and more over the top. And is never, again, it's all out of focus, really. So you're like watching this like very hushed, serious conversation while there's just this like flailing going on in the background. Again, incredibly uncomfortable. They leave and they head basically, one of the things that they've talked about, while they're driving around and while she's driving him around in her car is, she says like, oh, like, do you want to come back to my place? He, kind of throws her off, says no. And while they're at Denny's, he's been, constantly looking at the clock, right? Trying to figure out like, okay, like when can I go to this, I think it's the strip club, like off the side of the highway where this Buffalo Bills retired kicker, owns. And so, when they leave the Denny's, right, he basically like says like, all right, like we're done. You can go home now. Goes to the payphone, calls the strip club and finds out, oh, the guy's not in town. He doesn't come in until 2 a.m. It's like 8 or whatever. He's like, all right, fine. I guess we can go get a hotel. They go back to, again, a just absolutely horrible hole in the wall motel. Like it's just grim and dirty. And the whole thing is, it almost has this green cast to it.
Yeah.
And, the two of them go back. Clearly she is envisioning, romantic entanglement. He is not at all. There's a very funny moment where he wants to go take a bath. And so he gets into the bath and she's like, oh, hey, can I come in? And he's just aghast. He's like, no, you cannot, like I don't want to be in the bath. And it's again, there's never any time for this, to be comedic. It's just sort of something you notice. But, as she sort of wears him down, we see this, evolution where it's like, okay, well, you can come in, but you can't look. So she's like, got her hands over her eyes. And then, it kind of cuts to the next stage of the conversation. They're in the bath together and you see her, presumably wearing nothing. And then the pans over to Billy and he's wearing a shirt in the bath, which again is just a very funny, like background joke through the whole thing. But as that develops, right, the two of them, I mean, literally just sit in or like lay in bed next to each other. Again, they're sort of shot in this way where you can see he is incredibly uncomfortable with this. He's sort of, arms together on the opposite side. But, ultimately the time comes for him to go to, confront the man who sent him to jail. Maybe. And so as he gets up to leave, she's like, hey, like, what are you doing? Where are you going? It's go, I was going to bring you some coffee, something that she had expressed interest in earlier. And she says like, okay, we'll just like if you're not going to come back, just tell me. And he's like, no, I'll come back. And while going through his items in, this locker in this bowling alley, he pulled out, a tiny little pocket pistol, right? Like one of those tiny little Saturday Night Specials. It is, again, kind of comedically small. And he's, as he walks out of the hotel, which we realize now is across the street from this strip club, we see him pull out the gun. And as he walks in, he calls Goon again. Now, I don't remember what Goon's actual name is, but a major
Rocky.
theme in their interaction, Rocky, yes, is that Goon doesn't want to be called Goon anymore. He wants to be called Rocky. And Billy has been making fun of him the entire time, again, being very cruel to this disabled man. Ironically enough, by the way, I don't know if you noticed this. One of the things he criticizes goon slash Rocky for is always doing exactly what his mother tells him to, which I
Yeah.
thought was a very interesting thing that, Billy identifies that in Goon, not in his own experience.
Yeah.
But he stands outside and basically, says, all right, Goon, like, you can have all my stuff, kind of signaling that he's going in on a one-way mission. So we've covered a lot of ground there, Andy. Before we get into kind of the climax, I'm curious if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, for sure. Because one of the few things that I made some notes about was this issue of time. It it pops up again and again and again, where and it really is made obvious in that scene in the little photo booth, where he's saying something about, the present. He's screaming at her to put on some sort of facial expression that will evidence this idea of we span time. We're married. That's not, not you're a whore, not any of this other stuff, not you want to kiss me. We span time. And he hits this beat over and over and over. There's, the lost 7 years of time in, or whatever it is, 5-6 years of in jail. And there's that moment in the bathtub scene. My wife was howling. I mean, just it's almost Coen-esque. It's really good. That's when the comedic aspect was like, say what you will about Vincent Gallo, like, if that's his debut movie, like, the dude has skills. It's maybe not my favorite movie or what have you. It's uncomfortable, but dude, he's got skills. From every little bit of it is kind of masterful. Like the way he closes the door, the timing is perfect. And as you mentioned, the way he cuts, and they're getting closer, but now they're in the bathtub together, clothed. It's completely absurd. And he mentioned somewhere in there, like probably the funniest thing in the whole movie to me was right there where he says, and pathetic, he says, my dad would only let me put in like 1.5 inches of water into the bathtub, and all he wants is like a full bath, and he's in this $30 hotel, and he finally has gotten his full bath. But to think of a father who would be so cheap, that he would only let his kid put 1.5 inches of warm water into the bathtub just struck me as, I don't know, hilarious. That's to go back to this issue of time. Like, he cuts, he uses this really, I think, pretty sweet technique to pass that time. And he did that earlier. I forget quite when, but he's using that technique to avoid what we know is going to be like another way of presenting time passing, that I really appreciated. It was pretty quick, it keeps your attention, and then you get the payoff. But the time recurs again, as you point out, where 2:30 a.m. is when this kicker, the Buffalo Bills kicker, that maybe intentionally whiffed this field goal and in Billy's mind lost him all of this money and put him on this downward trajectory. At 2:30 a.m., the guy's going to show up at his, again, very low rent, I think it's called Solid Gold strip club. And that moment, which you touched on there, where he's trying to leave the room to go do this job, and she knows that something's up. He's not going to come back. It's almost, it's again where it's pretty masterful, I think, where you're laughing, you're disgusted. And then this moment passes where you realize how actually vulnerable and broken these two people are. She's not wanting him to go. She doesn't want to be away from him. And she kind of knows that he may or may not be coming back, but it's pretty obvious to us that he's lying to her. And that was the point where the Christina Ricci character, kind of breaks your heart, or broke mine a little bit. Like, what's her family situation? Evidently her dad didn't put her on some type of course, to know what love is or something like that. She's in this dingy hotel with this guy who's about to cross the street and take out, again, like some low rent former professional Buffalo Bills kicker who ruined his life. But the time has come, and this theme hits and hits, and then he crosses the street. He goes to the strip club, and he makes this call to his friend, the Goon. I didn't realize it till now, but Goon, this mentally, he's not quite retarded, but he's definitely off. He's a little slow, and he's Billy's only friend. Is the guy who's just basically telling him, like, just don't do bad things, Billy. That's all his refrain is, like, don't do any bad things. And it is like, you're at that point in the movie, I'm just watching it like, man, whatever her name is, Christina Ricci, she's pretty okay. You're not going to do better than this. She loves you. She wants to, you're free of your parents. You got a little money. And Goon, the mentally retarded guy or whatever he is, slow, is saying to you, just don't do bad things. Just don't do bad things. And that too is kind of heartbreaking in its like absurdity, but then this aspect that we saw of Billy in the bowling alley asserts itself just for a minute again. Like, it's a gangster type of vibe really quick. He's got this kind of leathery jacket, strip club, and then he hits the strip club. He goes inside, and we're kind of in this dream mode again, right? Like, the way it's shot is odd. I mean, it's not like Michael Mann Collateral, where everything is, I don't know, very intense. It's slow, and he maybe even goes to slow motion at that point, and the music shifts, and it's just bizarre, right?
Well, and we sort of have this walk through this, and it's in a Hollywood movie. This would be high glamour. This is not. This looks like an Elks Club. It's like this, like, dingy, like, you've got like space savers, like, it's like a 6-foot ceiling practically.
Yeah.
Not to be rude, but there's neither the clientele or let's be honest. It's not exactly a like a garden of earthly delights, I'll put it that way. And this character of the kicker is kind of, again, just comedically disgusting. Like, he's like fat, wearing a bow tie. He's got like a half drunk bottle of champagne. And, as Billy, pulls out the gun to shoot him, everything freezes, and we get these kind of series of still frames. And what's interesting is that it's just everyone on set being still. Like, it's like a stage play, right? So you can see, people slightly like breathing or moving or blinking in the background. Vincent Gallo in the foreground, right? And I, again, think that's kind of deliberately done. And we see him, shoot this guy, and the blood is very stylized. It's almost these like crystals, coming out of the wounds, like erupting. Translucent. It looks like a Christmas light or something. And obviously we see, Billy shoot himself, and we get a vision of his grave, and his parents are sitting next to his grave, and his dad is looking at his mom as she's maybe crying, maybe not, saying like, all right, come on, I'm hungry. It's 2 p.m. already. Right. Again, it's not like they're there all night. And his mom is, we realize, listening to like a little transistor radio of the Buffalo Bills. And then, the kind of spell is broken. He's standing across from, this kicker. And the kicker, I think he like offers him a beer or something. Just like, hey.
Yeah.
And Billy just turns on his heel, walks out, and throws his gun away, calls Goon, who at the last, moment was very touching. He's like, all right, he calls him Rocky in that moment, gives him all his stuff. He basically calls him, and he's like, and there are multiple moments in this where he just verbally abuses him at kind of ridiculous length. And he's basically like, you're an idiot. You're always going to be called a goon. You're retarded. I've got a girlfriend. Goodbye. You can't have my stuff. And hangs up the phone. And so we see him basically, ironically enough, choose not to do bad things, albeit while still verbally abusing Goon. And then, there's this sort of, touching moment where, throughout this kind of after, the dinner party or the lunch, I guess, which is the kind of, middle part of this, Christina Ricci's constantly been asking for a hot chocolate. It hasn't happened. And so he basically, goes across to this like donut shop. Right. And we see this kind of, full like character kind of reversal where he's kind of like giddy with love. Yeah. And again, the guy's in this donut shop at 2:30 in the morning, just some old man reading a newspaper and the guy behind the counter, but still, nonetheless, he like, generously tips the guy at the donut stand. I think he tips him like $3 on like a $2 order or something, and goes back. And that's sort of where the movie ends. So any comments on kind of that last segment?
Well, it's brilliantly done. The tension is still there. Like I kept asking myself, now that he's had this, like you say, character shift, like everything's changed. There's music, people are smiling. Billy is made this right choice and he's in love. Like it's evident, like there's a lightness in his step and he's like a whole different human being. And I'm wondering, is she still going to be there? Is his girlfriend still going to be sitting in that hotel room? It's only been maybe 10, 20 minutes, but there's some doubt maybe, which isn't, it doesn't come to fruition. Of course, the girl is there and they have this happy ending, which is, man, there's the thing of, do you have a happy ending or do you not? Well, we have to have a happy ending for the audience or everyone. There's always this kind of tension in anything that's like slightly above just standard Hollywood garbage. And, but this is one of these, again, very kind of Cassavetes-esque, that ending, the donut shop, the way he's moving. And it's also like, to a West Coast dude such as myself, it's very East Coast coded, which is great. I mean, it's recognizable as a major film goer myself. I loved it though. I mean, I love the ending because you've had the catharsis, like you've seen, or the negative catharsis maybe, where like, yeah, like this could happen. A dude could smoke this loser sort of nobody in his trashy Elks Club strip bar and then blow his own brains out. Like awful shit happens all the time like that. But for some reason, like you say, he just spins on his heels and it's like a whole different world. And then you get, I think it's the last scene, right? They're embracing, Billy and the Christina, what's her name? Layla. And, yeah, again, it's kind of a masterful film. I have to admit, in many ways, it's a pretty great movie at like craft technical levels. And, I mean, it's a roller coaster ride in terms of the emotions, like the disgust, the depression, the sympathy that you feel for this guy along the way. It's pretty profound.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of my opinions on it, and I did enjoy it. Obviously, not the first time so much. So I can think of less than 5 movies I've ever walked out of, or the equivalent, in my entire life, and this is one of them. And I came back to it. So take that for what you will. But I can guarantee you have never seen anything like this. It is a very unique movie, which is, worth it if nothing else. It is awful and hilarious and cynical and disgusting and poignant all at once. It's sort of a unique mix. And as both Andy and I have said, the film craft is very, very well done. This movie is shot in an interesting way. And, you can look at any one of those and say, oh, well, that's a gimmick. And like, well, it may well be, but there's many different techniques like that used in interesting ways. So the visuals will keep you going through the movie. I like it. I recommend it. It's odd if you watch this and you say that was a horrible movie. I could be convinced, I could understand how someone would have that reaction. It's not necessarily even the most enjoyable viewing experience I've ever had, but I think it's unique. And I think that dynamic between, him and his parents, that dynamic between, him and this kind of ticking clock, either, the sort of faded moment or also the time he's lost, is worth viewing. So I recommend it. My wife watched it and loved it, which is honestly kind of bizarre given her taste in movies. So who knows? Maybe someone else would like it. But Andy, this was a ton of fun, man. I really enjoyed this. I promise to let you pick the next movie.
Okay.
So I'll let you pick something that's less weird. But yeah, man, where can people find you?
X is the main spot. It's Golden Goat Guild. And yeah, in the link tree, everything is there. I'm also on Substack. Yeah, that's it.
Well, great. And I just wanted to say, I was telling you about this privately, but I've continued to have good reviews for Crowbar pile in from both people in my personal life, people on social media saying, literally, I got one I sent to you, Andy, that said, thank you for having Andy on. Crowbar was amazing. Somewhat similar. So people like the book. You can check that out at the link in the description. Much like Buffalo 66, I've never read anything like it. It's a very unique book. I enjoyed it. Maybe don't use me for the blurbs on the next one, right? Anyway, in all seriousness, guys, you can find my stuff on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to pay me a few bucks, you get the episodes early and ad-free. You guys have been great. The show's really growing. I appreciate it. Andy, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Everyone at home, keep your head up. Good night.